Viewers of the Civic Space TV, friends of the Youth Roundtable, welcome to yet another episode of the Youth Roundtable. Unfortunately for us, this episode comes at a time when the country continues to mourn the death and untimely demise of the late Right Honourable Speaker of Parliament, the now late Right Honourable Jacob Oulanyah. But even in this somber moment, we shall attempt to have conversations that are pertinent to us as a country, to us as an East African region, but also to us as a continent of Africa. The issue of the Federation of East Africa has been one that has been lumbering for quite a long period of time. This federation has taken several strides. The political, we have seen certain advancements, but the focus of the day seems to be around the economic integration of the region. And projects like the oil discovery have taken center stage in terms of bringing the region together to exploit these resources, but also to harness their naturally given endowed resources. And in this particular case, we shall focus on the East African crude oil project. We know that Uganda has made commitments towards developing this particular project, with having companies signing MOUs with the government of Uganda to ensure that our oil, at least by 2025, sees its first barrel leaving the ground. But we also know that this comes at the expense of the environment, and therefore we are here to assess the impact of this project and how it has continuously affected the people of Uganda, but also our environment at large. And to, of course, the Youth Roundtable picks out the cream of the cream to have conversations around such pertinent matters. And I will just introduce them in a second or two. And from my extreme right is a friend of mine, Mrs. Should I say Mrs. or Miss Himara Kobusingye. Kobusingye, all I know is you are an activist with Rise Up movement. I'll give you an opportunity to say anything else, but also say hello to our viewers.
Thank you very much, Kidega. My name is Kobusingye Himara, a climate justice, gender justice, and sexual reproductive health activist. And I do my work and projects under the Rise Up movement, and I belong to the Rise Up movement. Thank you very much.
Oh, wow, very interesting. I love it that you do so many things around justice. I mean, with the current day and era, where the likes of Brian will tell you that there is not so much justice that we see in the world. I'm glad that you're focusing your areas around climate justice and human rights. Sorry, and gender justice. Next to Comrade Himara is a maiden appearance on this show by the names, just to be specific, Arans Tabaruka, CEO of African Dossier News Agency.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kidega. Unlike the Miss and Mrs. attribution, the Mr. remains at any age above 18.
Okay.
And I'm proud to say, Mr. Kidega, it's a privilege to be on this show. My name is Arans Tabaruka, rightly so, and I am the CEO of the African Dossier, but also a lawyer and a human rights and business rights activist.
Oh.
Glad to be on the show.
Very interesting. There are not so many young CEOs that we have today.
They choose to be so.
So happy that you're among the few CEOs that we have in Uganda.
Thank you.
Next to Mr. Arans is someone whose face is now becoming more familiar on this show by the names Aweko. Scovia. Aweko is a PhD candidate of political behavior. Scovia, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Kidega, for having me here once again. As he said, my name is Scovia Aweko. I'm a political science PhD candidate focusing on political behavior and institutions.
Yeah, then last but not least is the gentleman right next to me. He has so many titles, but today we shall focus on the specific one, being the Executive Director of African Initiative on Food Security and Environment. In case he wishes to let us know about anything else about himself, please, now is the time.
I am called Brian Atuheire. I am the ED at the African Initiative on Food Security and Environment, but I also run another project under some media house called Vanguard News, and it's in our interest that our people come to know what they do not know, because rightly so, like you said, all that is in the minds of Ugandans is that they are going to get money they are going to get jobs, they are going to get oil, and Uganda will be a prosperous country, maybe first world country in the next maybe 10 years. Middle income economy, that talk. But there is a challenge that we're grappling with as a world, trying to make sure that we keep below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Uganda is a signatory to the Paris Agreement, and therefore a project that can release 34 million tons of carbon into the atmosphere each year, once completed, is not towards that. And I think that's what it's going to be about, that, around that. And there are many other issues like environment, human rights abuses, the media being abused, the media being gagged to cover one side, being gagged on social media, not speak about the other narrative. And we shall try to make sure that we discuss what we don't want to discuss maybe.
Okay. I can see you've already preempted my first question to you, but I'll still put it up to you, Brian. And the question around the background of where we find ourselves today. Maybe for the benefit of our viewers who has not had the opportunity to know what EACOP is, or not even to know about what is happening in the country. Before you take sides on either being pessimistic.
I have a side.
Yes. But before you do that, can the viewer first appreciate what EACOP is? Maybe just a background.
EACOP.
Then we can begin to take the sides.
Okay. EACOP is, in full, is East African Oil Crude Pipeline. It is a 1,443 kilometer pipeline. It's going to be transporting oil from the Kingfisher from Kabale in Hoima to Tang at the Indian Ocean. It's going to be electrically heated. It's going to be the longest heated pipeline in the world. Once complete, that pipeline will be emitting 34.5 million tons of carbon every year. But also, that pipeline passes through Uganda's oldest and Uganda's largest national park, the Murchison Falls National Park. It goes through the Lake Victoria, where about 40 million people depend for water and their livelihoods. It goes through many other forests and many ecosystems with many birds, endangered species, some of them endemic to the area of the Alpine region. And that's what Ugandans have to know before they discuss. And we are also having, somehow we are rising in tourism at a very, very big rate, before COVID, for example. And to put that at stake, and what at stake could endanger everything. That's what we are saying. But also what we are saying aside, you see, there is no, like I always said, there is no dry water. Whether it's vapor, whether it's ice, whether it's cold water, or what. At the end of the day, water is not dry. So there cannot be clean oil. So we want to discuss the uncleanness of the oil. And to affirm that it is, by the way, on how the behavior that those ones who are involved have showed. The behavior of hiding documents, the behavior of not involving communities who are making some laws like the EACOP bill, and passing them very quickly and assenting to them very, very quickly overnight, and then people rush into them. But also the deployment that there is against the media, covering Arans has been in the field. He'll tell you how it is hard to cover an EACOP story, how it is hard to cover a story on biodiversity in that area. So we would want not take sides, but we would want to discuss the dangers, because the profit in quotes, the profits EACOP will bring have been discussed thoroughly well by those ones promoting them. But the dangers, nobody is discussing them, and that's why these shows and other things are going to run, social media campaigns and.
Okay.
Important.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. I by all means have follow-up questions for you because of how you seem to package your presentation. Scovia, let me come to you shortly. It looks like we find ourselves between a rock and a hard place. Ugandans are clamoring for economic liberation. Okay, they're clamoring and saying that, what is our government doing for us? We need to get out of this, bad economic status. We must move towards the middle income status. And then there's an opportunity that we have placed before us whereby we can explore our natural resources and therefore get Ugandans to work and therefore increase our maybe foreign trade and things like that. But again, it looks like the brands are saying, but look here, do we have to do it this much? So maybe, what is your own view? Do you think that this is a bitter pill to swallow? That we must, by all means, damage the environment for us to, I mean, you cannot make your bed and lay on it.
So, for me personally, right, the promise of oil money, actually oil revenue moving Uganda from, right, a low income status to middle income status is enticing for everyone, right? We've kind of seen the levels of poverty in this country and how grueling it is, right, how people suffer and strive every day to actually make ends meet. And so the promise that, right, oil will automatically or, right, within a few short years completely transform the lives of Ugandans is enticing, but we all know that is a lie based on, right, experiences of many other countries that have been in the position of Uganda. And one of the reasons for that is that we do not actually have the institutions to manage the oil revenue that will be coming, right? We have this promise of, oh, there's this common good that will really improve.
What do you mean we don't have institutions?
We do have institutions, but our institutions are weak and they're incapable of managing the sort of revenues that the oil promises to bring in. And the reason why I say the institutions are weak is if we look at some of the institutions that are put in place to, right, like manage and kind of overview and keep oversight of this project, right? We've got parliament, we've got laws that are being enacted, we've got the Ministry of Energy and Oil. But if we look at it, all these are, right, of course our parliament, if we look at parliament today, has been captured by the executive branch in a whole lot of ways. And therefore, I cannot say that the Ugandan parliament is actually an independent oversight body for this type of project. The Ministry of Oil and Energy, right, of course, the minister is appointed by the executive as well. And so all of these institutions are prone to political interference to the extent that we've all heard the stories of corruption in the country. We've heard the stories of like ghost workers and all of that. So if we have been really struggling with the issues of corruption, mismanagement of government funds and all of that, we cannot then put our, right, like put stake that this, right, this project, this new pipeline will be so transformative, right, in the lives of Ugandans. And I say that, right, looking at the examples of countries like Angola, right, that have oil revenue, but due to the levels of corruption and mismanagement of funds and revenues, there's been little economic development.
Okay, fair enough. Comrade Arans, there seems not to be so many kind words coming from this side of the panel regarding this regarding this EACOP project. Let me just hear your view.
Well, especially to the viewers, Mr. Kidega, it's very important for us to understand that this would be good project has been purposed a threat that the government took a benchmark on countries which are exploring oil and gas, and I can give you examples. They have been in consultation with Norway, Australia, in Angola, in Nigeria, and of course, many other oil-producing countries in the Middle East, and especially in the Arab world. But the question then I thought you would ask, especially with the trending extremism, would be, have we taken lessons? Because the failure to take lessons then means that we are doomed. So you want us to start from the concept of the doom. I'll give you the narrative or the reverse of the narrative that you would want even the public to hear. That there is about 6 million barrels of oil?
Somewhere around that.
In the ground.
Yeah.
But for example, since about 20 2001, when government brings on the commitment to explore oil, there have finally been a number of wells increasing from 14 to 28. These are facts, so they are available for you. But we never get the increment in terms of the oil barrels increasing. Isn't that factual? So do you believe that is good information for us? So first of all, as a journalist, I would want to be trustworthy in giving information, but also to be balanced. So when you have a catalog of information, figures, not balanced, as a journalist, what do? I want to tell you, Mr. Kidega and the viewers, that the biggest problem we have in this country is the dishonesty that we want to use in development agenda. And the moment we start from the flip side, then the problem we will have is the extremist understanding of development projects. Oil and gas in Uganda, as I already said, is an important venture. But then the question again is, how good can we explore oil? Or how better can we explore the oil and gas without damaging, tarnishing, not necessarily the environment? I'll tell you, in Buhuka, and that is around Kabale, where we anticipate an airport, an oil refinery proposed prior. There was a proposed oil refinery in Buhuka, that is in Kabale in Hoima, formerly Hoima, but now Chikuve district. Yeah. There has been large amounts of human displacement. Before you can talk about trees, before you can talk about soil, before you can talk about water, before you can talk about land, there is a huge, immense displacement of human beings. I don't want to take you to the Bible. Yeah. That's the reason why I'm emphasizing on humans first. Then they will take charge of the rest. So you already displaced the humans, and you expect the land, the biodiversity, the water, and any other life to survive. Okay. That is where we are. If you must tolerate this conversation, and I choose to use the word tolerate, you have to agree with the facts as they come, perceive them as they are, and then accept that this is where we are. This is the situation. In Uganda today, it's very difficult to follow the principle. And what would be the principle in the oil and exploration, or utilization of the resources, exploitation of the resources, especially natural resources? It would be a free, prior, informed consent. That is a principle that narrates the fact that these resources are as per the Constitution, Article 126, 146 as well, belong to the people. So the government explores them on behalf of the people. Are they free to participate, to take part in the exploration and the benefit of these resources? Are they informed about the exploration, the benefit of these resources? Are they, do they consent to this?
Well,
and the answer,
I'm glad that you're asking these questions, and hopefully this conversation will attempt to answer some of them. But just before we skip a step, let me first hear from Comrade Himara. Himara, you've heard the views of our three colleagues here, and my own perception is that they are not very contented about the way things are happening or the way things are unfolding. Let me just hear your own perspective.
Thank you very much, Kidega. In my view, I think I don't differ so much from them, though for me, I am for the climate and for the biodiversity. Yeah. Right now, the planet is at a warming degree of 1.1, or we are moving towards 1.5. And we are trying to keep it at below 1.5 or at 1.5. Right now, the 1.2 or the 1.1 we're having right now, we are dying. There's flooding everywhere. We have seen droughts in Somalia, Kenya, and Ethiopia. We are seeing landslides all over. We are seeing storms every time, the hurricanes happening. So right now we are at in a devastating situation as regards to the global warming state of our planet.
Yeah.
It's not advisable for us to be investing in another pollution scheme and another, because the oil pipeline, what the previous speakers failed to tell you is it's going to be emitting 34 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere
every year.
That is 7 times more than what our country is emitting right now. So we are making our country a major polluter. At what cost? At a 15%. Let's skip that because I actually don't want us to actually even drill the oil. But let's say we have drilled the oil and fast forward. Is our country ready to deal with the aftermath of this fossil fuel pollution and everything and the biodiversity? Are we ready? Can we afford even the 15%? Can the 15% pay for the repercussions that the oils will cause to our people and our communities? I don't think it's an advisable scheme for us to venture in. And I don't think it's healthy. Like the previous speakers have told you, since 2012, children in Chivale and Kavale, I think Kavale, are not studying because they were displaced. Some people were decided for, what's it called? Compensation. And then other people decided for resettlement. But now the families that decided for resettlement can't even go to school because the governments have destroyed schools. There are no schools being put up there, so students are not studying. That means if there are no schools, I am very doubtful that there is a hospital in that place. You understand? That means there are no service, just normal services we're supposed to get. So we already, before, we are calling it a development, but actually it's a disadvantage, or it's a catastrophe to the people that are already living in that environment.
Okay.
So yeah, for now, I think.
I want to say something about the 15 she's talking about.
Okay.
Because people might ask, what is this 15? She's simply saying that, for example, the oil pipeline, what you want to call EACOP, 62% of the shares belong to TAR. 8% belongs to CNOOC, a Chinese offshore company, and 15 belong to Kenya, to Tanzania, and 15 to Uganda. So she's asking, the consequence the oil pipeline will cause, shall our share of 15% cover for what we're going to destroy and degenerate into a carbon bomb?
Okay, that's a fair enough question. But my question to you, Brian, is that, and I'm glad that you brought it up, the COP26 conference that happened last year. And people have come up to make certain statements, which I would not want to substantiate here, but maybe you could give us your own view. That, for example, Europe in the 19th century went ahead to industrialize heavily. Okay, they set up industries. They exploited whatever resource they could exploit, the coal and everything. And Europe today emits, I don't know how much percentage towards the global warming that we see happening in the world. And now here they are telling us that, oh, you know what, you guys, don't exploit your resources because the climate is ever changing. I mean, climate change is here. So accusations have been made, and this, I'll give you a chance to maybe tell us that this whole climate change thing could be a Western agenda just to curtail African development and keep us at our knees. We don't exploit our resources, whereas for them, they've already exploited theirs. Okay, so they are using us as a shock absorber for the climate, that Africans, you plant trees. Okay, they give you as much money as you can, as much donations as you can, as much seedlings as you need for you to plant trees and compensate.
You see what you're saying. What you're saying is wrong. The Stop Cambo campaign is a British campaign carried out by Britons, not by Ugandans and Kenyans and Tanzanians and Africans. And you see, my biggest problem is this whole neo-colonial agenda sometimes abuse the most important discussions can have. They did not know what it will be. Now we know what it will be. If we don't want, as Africans, to be part of it, then don't go to Cartagena Protocol, don't go for biodiversity things, stop going for COP, just don't even mention COP. If COP, because all you're saying that the decisions that COP are a Western agenda, and therefore should not follow them. Why doesn't Uganda withdraw from, why can't Uganda withdraw? That's one. Because you cannot say, I would want to sit on this chair of Hajj of Muslims, but while seated with them, I'll be eating pork. You got to become a Christian and go buy your pork clearly and eat it. As well, and you see, also what they don't want to tell us is that the government of Uganda might gain from those forums, and a country could gain from those forums, could gain from asking to invest in renewable energy than invest in fossil fuels at this time in point. But of course, another thing I want to tell you is that the talk about development and what. Let me tell you something. Oil projects in other countries, most of them happen in the deserts. Most actually desert countries we don't have oil in Africa, for example, and regions that like for example in Uganda, semi-arid like Karamoja would have oil. But for us, we have oil where the heart of the world is in terms of biodiversity. And we've been gaining from this biodiversity and could even harness it more. So I would want to tell you, and thirdly, is it the Western world that has made, actually another thing I wanted to tell you, the Western world actually funds fossil fuels, and you must resist them. Total, 62% in the
Kingfisher project.
The Kingfisher project in EACOP, in Kidega project, is actually a French company. Is France an African country?
Thank you.
And thirdly, shockingly to you, the money it will take as Total, Uganda, the whole of country, Uganda will never get it because they have more shares than us. Instead, if you're saying, if you don't want Western development, should stop that and then deny them the money.
Okay, fair enough. Scovia, just 1 second.
Deny them the money.
Hamira had a concern. Let me give her the opportunity to put it across. Then I'll come to you. Then I'll come to Comrade Arans. Yes, Hamira.
Yes, thank you very much. You said people are saying the Western world does not want Africa to develop because they developed on fossil fuels. In the Paris Agreement, it was discussed that for developing countries not to develop on the same coast of the planet like developed countries did, there has to be something called climate finance to help us mitigate and adapt to climate changes. Now, let's put a pin on that and let's go back to what Brian said about Total is taking
62%.
most of the profits, and same as China, these are developed countries. You get, like I said, 15% is peanuts.
Cartoon money.
You get, it's like a grain of salt or something in an ocean. You understand? So it's still going back to the developed countries. Now, if developed countries really wanted to help us, because they're also claiming they're helping us develop, you get. But if they really wanted to help us develop, then they let them provide the climate finance of 100 billion per year that they promised. That way we can invest in greener energies. Imagine we powered our whole country with solar. Do you know how much heat we have from the sun to power the whole country? We would not have electricity shortages and all these things. But again, also, like you said, for me, I am a climate justice and gender justice. But that means I am justice for the human and the earth. It is not justice if you're saying you're developing through fossil fuels, yet the communities you're saying you're developing are actually suffering right now, or even looking at suffering in the future. You understand? It's useless for you to say, it's like someone saying, I am giving you a sweet, but yet they are carrying your kid into their house to rape them. And that is what Total and Paris are doing to us right now. They're giving us a sweet, but in actual sense, 10 years, 5 years from now, we shall be raped.
But Himara, is it fair? Because I have read from Kenneth Walt. Kenneth Walt is a global scholar of international politics. And he tells you that the world is a self-help system. Every state is there to pick as much as they can from the world. So it is also not fair for us to imagine that maybe those Western powers have our best interests at heart. They are here to exploit us as much as possible. So for us to sit back and be like, oh, wow, okay, these guys should have our interests at heart, and therefore they should take on less than this percentage.
Thank you very much.
Isn't that maybe,
you
aren't we asking for too much?
Thank you very much.
Shouldn't we focus on building our own infrastructures and economies so that we don't find ourselves at the feet of these?
Two questions.
Yeah.
What would you rather? To develop in 10 years and die in 15, or to develop in 15 and have the planet live for 1,000 more years? That is one. Two.
So are you saying that carbon dioxide is going to be a cause of
we are moving towards?
Because if that was the case, then whites or Europeans would not be having
those people have developed,
that kind of life expectancy.
Like I told you, my first question was, those people have built the capacity to deal with climate change. For them, climate change is a matter of 2030. For us here in Africa, it's a matter of now.
Okay.
One of my projects prior to me becoming a climate activist was teaching women how to do small-scale farming. You do not know what kind of disappointment, after me putting in all that energy, all that financial investment, for 3 months down the road, where you've planted your things on the veranda, because I come from the slums of Kampala, everyone knows that, and then your plants wither. But you've taught these women at the promise of, when you get vegetables, that means you've saved 500 shillings. You don't have to go, you can save that 500 shillings and probably invest it in posho that you cannot plant, and then your children can eat tomorrow. You understand? But we're already having unpredictable weathers. We are having too much sunshine. When the rain comes, we are having floods.
Erratic.
You understand? This is what we are dealing with right now. In Somalia and Ethiopia, those guys, wild animals and domestic animals are falling dead. You understand? And you're trying to compare yourself to a place that does not know about climate change at all. For them, they are thinking, okay, it will come in 2030, then 2030 shall have 20 years. That means for them, they will feel the repercussions in probably 2100. You understand? They have built the resiliency. Now, when we say they're supposed to give us climate finance, it's because they have developed at the cost of the rest of the planet. And we do not want us, the developing countries, to develop in the same system they used to develop by polluting the planet. You understand? We have to develop in a better way, in sustainable energy ways. You understand? That way we don't pollute the planet. That way we balance out the carbon dioxide and find out, like, we improve on the sinks and reduce on the sources of greenhouse gases. That way we have our children. I believe most of us don't have children here. That way our children have a future, or our young sisters, or the children of tomorrow. You understand? Because if we do not take care of our planet, the promise for tomorrow is a very hard one to find. That's the truth. You understand? So much as we're looking at money and all these things, trust me, it will be useless if your grandchildren or your children or your children's children cannot enjoy it.
Okay, fair enough. Yes, sure, Scovia.
All right, so I think one of the things that we are talking about, like, we're talking about climate change like it's something that's going to hit us in, I don't know how many years, but climate change is here. And I'm going to tell you one thing. So I'm from Pakwach, and our main source of water is the Albert Nile. And basically Lake Albert, right, is a source of, that Albert Nile. And one thing for sure is that we have rising sea levels, or rising water levels. I was so surprised when I went to the village in December, and I found that there were villages that were literally submerged underwater, and people had to be displaced because of the rising water levels. And so if we are experiencing that right now, this is before we even start drilling, before we start experiencing, right, the environmental impact of exploring and exploiting the oil reserves that we have. What more is going to come, right? How many more people are going to be displaced? How many more people are going to be affected, right? We're talking about this like, oh, this is something that's going to happen in the long term, but people are already being affected. And the other thing you mentioned, right, Kenneth Waltz. Kenneth Waltz is, right, talking about the international system where people live in anarchy, right? It's a self-help system because there is no overarching world government, and therefore everyone has to look out for themselves. But we in Uganda here, where this is not, right, there's no anarchy here, we have a government, right? And the problem with our government is that we do have weak institutions that are unable to manage, right, this sort of oil exploration and governance that is expected to actually be able to, I guess, like, remedy some of the harmful impacts. And I'm not even talking about the environment, I'm sorry, like the air pollution and all of that. I'm talking about things like biodiversity, the people that are being displaced.
Life underwater.
Life underwater. Because what are our institutions that are set out for managing, of protecting our environment, right? One of them is NEMA. Right? And we've all seen those Twitter stories of people actually having to call NEMA to, right, like, go and attend to someone who is trying to construct in a wetland, in a swamp. If at this point in time, NEMA is unable to manage and hold individuals that are quote unquote powerful, right? Hold them to account. How are they supposed to hold international corporations that have so much money and are being backed by the government because they're what, investors, and therefore they're kind of protected? How is NEMA supposed to hold them to account? How is supposed to hold those groups accountable to some of their actions? And I know that all of these corporations are talking about corporate social responsibility, but they don't really tell us what does that mean, right? Oh yeah, they're going to resettle people, they're going to give them cash handouts for whatever land they've taken over. But as, right, Comrade here was mentioning, we've got students who have been out of school because they were displaced, people who were, right, who had to basically lose their sources of livelihood, right? Their land, their animals, their crops, because they had to be resettled into new areas that they had nothing to do with and didn't know how to start a life over there. I think the environmental impact and the human impact of this project are far much wider and bigger than, you know, some of the things that we're speculating or even talking about here. And to think that, right, this is a project that's been lauded as, you know, this is going to be useful for every Ugandan and every Ugandan will benefit, when we're merely getting 15% and the corporations are getting more than 62%.
The lion's share.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. How does it even trickle down to the regular person?
Okay. Arans, my last question to you before we go for the break. You are a lawyer, and I'm sure you've addressed your mind to the case of there is this famous boxer, an athletic boxer, who got clearance from KCC at the time before it was turned into an authority. And he got clearance to construct his house in a swamp. Nyakana, yes. And then when the case went to High Court and then eventually to the Supreme Court, court actually held that the clearance that KCC had given Nyakana was not valid. So it shows that our government actually has taken strides towards safeguarding the environment, contrary to what Scovia is saying, that our government has totally ignored, you know, issues around conserving the environment. I think that it is fair that we give credit where it's due.
They are saying
because that is all the environment.
They are saying Buguma Forest to Hoima Sugar.
They wanted
to sell Madira, and people protested.
That's my question.
The people of Uganda have put the government on the spot.
Two things. As a lawyer, around the legal regime and legal framework. Because I think it was Brian who said that the process through which these policies and through which these bills and MOUs are passed are fraudulent.
And also signing and so hiding of the documents.
And there are certain irregularities. Brian, please give me a chance to ask my question. Yeah, have been flawed with irregularities, around the process. But maybe to the benefit of our viewers, could you elaborate for us the process through which, the legal framework through which some of these bills are supposed to come into place? What level of public participation is required by the law for a policy to come into place, so that we argue from the point of, okay, we know that government must seek public participation through these means, maybe through their MPs or through whatever process it is. So just that legal framework. And also, do you think that our government has taken certain strides towards ensuring that at least the legal frameworks are there in place, so that the environment is protected?
Thank you so much, and also to the viewers. Now, you see, I'll reverse the questions so that I can help you understand the difficulty we are getting through to speak about this topic. And that indeed helps you know that that's how difficult it is if it is for you, Mr. Kidega. I want you to imagine, like she's talking about Pakwach. I've been to Pakwach, I've been to Nebi, I've been at the other side of the river in Bulisa and along the Maxon Falls. I think the question is, do you think they actually know that government has a duty to protect them and to protect the environment, the people, as they see the beehive of activities that are happening? So just a quick one. The laws elaborate enough as provided for by the Constitution, the NEMA Act, the subsequent conventions that support our Constitution and subsequent statutes that govern this country in the management of our resources. It's really absurd. And I will tell you that it is presumed that the participation of society in the lawmaking process is as per Article 79 of the Constitution, that of course the members of Parliament, the Legislative Assembly will make laws to govern this country. When they make them, I think what is very important, and just reading from the case, I think you should actually also know that that's a 2007 case. There's been much more decisions made out of that decision. And the challenge is that the decision of court is subsequent to the issues raised in that matter. The matter was of enforcement. And so should we keep on discussing that NEMA has failed to enforce available laws that at their play? And I think I must feel pain with her that she doesn't see that it is not the institution, it's the government. There cannot fail to be a government and then you expect there should be an institution. And in fact, I want to tell you, where there is no legislative assembly,
There's no government in brief.
and there is no judiciary, there cannot be an executive. And that is the three arms of the government. We feel, some of us who are concerned, we feel that there is a de facto at play, and they will do as they wish. I have said this before on another space, that by the way, for you to aggregately understand the benefit of the oil and gas exploration in this country is for you to understand that even the money you are investing, you've already eaten it, already in loans and investment. Therefore, it is up to the venture partners, Sinok and Total, to exploit their resources and make profit and then go away. So the question then is, what do you remain with? And you see, this is how difficult it is to understand the concept of oil and gas exploration in this country without taking lessons from Nigeria, from Angola. I want to end, because our time looks to be up, so that we take a break. If you want statistical data, you want to allay, you need to know that Angola should have been the fastest growing country in Africa. Why? It's the most endowed country on this continent. Not DRC, not Uganda, not South Africa, not Egypt, not Morocco, not Tunisia. And so you need to revisit the statistical, both political and economical factors in Angola. So you know that this is what we should be prepared for. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, panelists. This, by all means, takes us to a short commercial break, and see you right shortly after. Well, we'll be back from that short commercial break. We hope that you are enjoying our conversations, but please feel free to put your comments on the comment section. If you agree with any of the panelists, let them know in the comment section, but also if you disagree with them, give us your alternative opinion. But above all, subscribe to this channel so that you can get our weekly updates of the Youth Roundtable. Well, we shall spare the next 30 minutes to wrap up this particular episode, and I'll begin with you, Comrade Himara. Clearly, it looks like we find ourselves in a difficult position as a country, as a people, but then by all means, we have to find a way forward. You know, where there's a will, there is a way. So how can we move forward from this point? You're a climate activist. Yes, the climate is important. That much no one is trying to dispute, you know, we must conserve the environment. But, you know, people also need to make money. I don't know, people need jobs. So how do we move forward from this point? Himara.
I'm speechless because the only way I see for us to move forward is to invest the money we're investing in fossil fuels, in our tourism industry, in our agriculture industry, in our fishing industry, because we have depended on this, and most of all, in cleaner energy like solars and hydrogen. That way, the 3-point-something billion that is being spent on fossils will be of greater use to the planet and to the people of Uganda and Tanzania and East Africa at large. Also, that kind of investment will not destroy people's lives. It will just amplify them. Imagine if the money that was given to people buying them off their land and leaving them homeless and leaving their children without education or without a future was invested in their agriculture and not in fossil fuels. Imagine how developed and how much food production we would have as a country that we would actually invest, or we would have good food supply for the world market. Or imagine if that money was invested in solar and how many jobs would have been created. So I believe we are investing a lot of money in the wrong field and destroying the planet while we're at it. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Comrade Arans, assuming we are to adopt some of the COP26 resolutions that encourages us to move towards renewable energies and adopting things like electric vehicles.
We quickly need to address the issue of dishonesty. We follow up the commitments. We have made commitments into the Paris Agreement. We have made commitments in regard to the economic, social, and cultural rights, and all the conventions that disregard the disabuse of the climate and our natural biodiversity. And therefore, just a quick one, by the way, one needs to know that the oil and gas venture partners in Uganda and Tanzania are looking for close to about 15 billion US dollars to finance the oil and gas sector across the region. That's not small money. It's quite a lot of money. And so, and again, when you look at how much of the jobs have been provided by the tourism sector, how much of the jobs, it needs no questioning, we've been able to make out of agriculture. And you look at the deceit, the deception that the NRM government comes with all the time, saying that their annual thematic celebrations and budget themes are along industrialization of agriculture, what. And then you look into the budget and you ask yourself how much money is going into this industrialization. Then you ask yourself, is the industrialization the exploitation? The amount of money they are putting into the oil and gas sector can be diverted to clean energy sectors, and we salvage the situation. But also a quick one, and it's a reminder, the dishonesty within the media and the government. The media seem to be in collaboration with the government to actually deny information that should be going to the communities, to freely inform the consent of our citizens. It is a constitutional right. It's a fundamental one. We're not supposed to be asking for these rights. And therefore, I think it's high time that I actually call upon the country to re-emphasize the issue of honesty. Honestly, if we must develop our country.
But Arans, I am glad that you brought out the issue of rights, but I also know that Thomas Hobbes tells you that the state also has the mandate to regulate certain rights. And I'm not saying that Ugandans don't have a right to information, but I'm saying, but I am saying, actually, there are only 4 non-derogable rights, and access to information is not a non-derogable right.
Absolutely.
So meaning it is not an inherent right that you have as a human being.
Absolutely.
So meaning the state gives and takes it when it deems fit.
I think you're taking me to where I should swim better. Let me just conclude this, because you have preempted the answer within your question.
Okay.
The non-derogable rights stand tall. We can leave them. But let's talk about the Access to Information Act, for example, which says the exception is that it is only for security and the sovereignty of our country. Let me ask you a question. What is the security implication on denying us the agreements of our oil? 2, what is there in our oil production agreements that our citizens shouldn't know?
But by now you should know that the insurgents in Kuwait was caused by an oil crisis. So if government deems fit that a given part of information could pose a threat to security, then I am not saying. Himara, just 1 second.
Comrade Moses, I would want to actually cut you short on that statement, because this is the thing. If we have lives being disorganized, lives being displaced, people losing their livelihoods, why would you not want us to know about it? That means you're doing something shady if you're actually hiding your bad manners. You understand? For you concealing what you're doing, actually the dangers you're doing and the injustices you're doing to our people, that is actually saying, hiding that actually makes people do whatever the insurgency you're talking about. You get? Provide people with this information and let them decide.
Fair enough.
Let me listen to you, Mr. Moses. I mean, Mr.
Moderator.
Yes, he's
Kidega again.
Kidega.
Yeah.
I mean, do you want us to go to Kuwait? You see, I said from the beginning that for us to address any crisis, if we are to solve any problem, we must look at the issues. So if you take me to Kuwait, what do you find? Are there any elements of Ugandans fighting with Mr. Museveni and his government about the oil? Absolutely no. But the continuing violation of denial of access to information underlined could lead that. So I am actually providing remedy.
A solution. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Scovia, let me come to you as you prepare to give us your last words regarding the way forward on this particular subject matter. Comrade Aran did hint on something, which is the strength or weakness of international institutions like the United Nations and their capacity to actually implement some of these resolutions. Is it that we just go there to sit in these conference halls and have our delegation sit there and agree to these very good, terms and conditions, then get back home and it's a whole forgotten case? Is it because the world, like you said, is anarchy in nature? There is no world military system, no world, body to implement some of these resolutions. So speak to 2 things. 1, do these international resolutions and conventions actually matter in terms of what trickles down to the sovereign countries? Then 2, your way forward regarding this.
All right, so these international conferences, as joining international organizations is important, because in these conferences, that's where we set norms and values that actually guide the way, some of the ways that we govern. And I know there's been a lot of talk about importation of ideas. However, right, some of these ideas are good ideas. For example, the UN does not force member states to be signatories of these international
Conventions,
laws,
yeah.
international conventions. These countries participate and sign onto these laws voluntarily. But once you sign onto these right laws and conventions, then you have to make sure that you implement them, right? And in a lot of ways, these international organizations cannot strong arm you into implementing, because they themselves, right, do acknowledge the sovereignty of these countries, which is why, right, our government institutions become, right, like it's important to have institutions that are able to hold government into account, right? Once you've signed these laws, you cannot violate them. And that actually brings me to my, right, like my parting words. One of the things that they've preempted some of the things that I wanted to say, and that is that our focus should be on the people, protecting the people and the environment. And one way that we could do that is through transparency, giving, right, civil society organizations access to some of the information that they need to hold governments accountable. Because if, let's say, my people in Pakwach, where they actually did some of this oil exploration, did not really understand what was going on, all they did know is that, oh, they're exploring oil, but they did not understand some of the impact, right, that oil exploration, or if they had found oil in Pakwach, what that would do to their lives, right? Setting up an oil refinery, right, that is a basis of a lot of pollution. And so by giving people information, right, that, of course, there's a lot of civil society organizations that conduct environmental impact studies, that talk to people and try to educate people about their rights, but they cannot do that without having access to that information. And we know that a lot of corporations and governments do try to hide, right, that information from people, especially if they know that that information is going to be damaging to their work. And so without that sort of transparency, we cannot say that this is a people-focused or an environmental-focused project that is supposed to be, right, for the common good, for the greater good, when there is no greater good, but in fact, it will be more harmful.
I'm glad that you brought out the aspect of transparency, and indeed Comrade Aran hinted on it, that the role of media, and I'm glad that in the next couple of minutes we shall be assessing the role of media towards transparency and this project. So Brian, what's your own way forward? I know you have no kind words, but let's just hear them.
No, I want to thank the banks that have decided not to fund the EACOP project. I want to thank the insurance companies, which are all foreign and are saying we don't want to invest here because they've been making money to try to continue to tell you that it's about you, Hurian. So the banks, the insurance companies, but I would also want to inform the public that the FID signing does not mean investment. It's just a decision. There is what they call the financial clause, gathering the money for the project. That we haven't reached. So we are still very, very far from seeing the first barrel of oil out of. So the excitement about it was 2016, becomes 2015. Every year so we wish that they keep postponing forever, because fossil fuels do not have a place on our planet, and we have to make our planet safe. That's my. So I support. I'm clear. I support the Stop EACOP campaign, for example. I support not investing in fossil fuels, and I support all those ones who are trying to invest in clean energy and protecting human rights along the EACOP route. And I would wish them to be more resilient, to look for information as far as they can, because you cannot have 30-meter radius through a park being raised using tractors and trailers, and lions, chimpanzees, elephants are dying or running away, and it just cause havoc like wildlife conflicts. I cannot support that.
Okay, fair enough. That by all means brings us to the end of this particular phase of the conversation. We now move to phase 2, which is to make an analysis on the role of media towards, because allegations at least have been put across from you panelists that, media is conspiring with the government, and those were your words, Comrade Aran. And I will begin with you, because at least you have a media background, you're a journalist, but also you are a lawyer, so you know what it means to, make certain statements. He who alleges must prove. So Let us begin by evaluating the role of media in terms of, educating the public about the advantages and disadvantages of this particular project. Do you think they're focused more on one side and ignored intentionally the other side?
So thank you so much, Mr. Kidega, and the listeners. And for many of those who really don't know my face on the media, means they have grown in this age. This is why I feel I speak with authority in terms of the role I've played as a journalist.
Yeah.
I think around 2005, I went into a radio station and got a job as a news anchor. I continued anchoring news and went to school and studied a diploma in journalism and went and did a degree in journalism. I came back at that level and became an editor. From holding a recorder and a notebook in the field, gathering facts about a story, into judging which story should be able to run on a running order for a newsroom. At that point, you have arrived. I will tell you. So I have been in this field to be sure, to understand that critically something is going wrong and that something is going right. And so when I started working with civil society organization in understanding the role of the media in improving the society, because short of the media coming out to be the vessel for good governance, for delivery of information, and for helping in the access of information, like I already said, where it's very difficult for the people of Chikuve to understand that there will be a few pipelines cross-cutting the district thrice. I tell you, you have not had any story telling the communities or the country that there are about 3 feeder pipelines going through one district and a major pipeline going through that same district. And I am here, thinking, when these people ban, this is an agricultural district. What would be the likely impact whatsoever? If you want to imagine, what would be the likely impact? And if actually, according to the environmental social impact assessments and the human rights based approach assessment done on this project could save this district. I'm just using this narrative of one district. I had an opportunity to be in Tanzania for 6 months with Civic Response on Environment and Development, partnering with the Oxfam, and we were drafting and articulating on issues of this approach to assess human rights business, human and business rights initiatives. And the question we did ask then was, what could go wrong? Then, that's about 2 years ago. So I understand the organizations have gone back again, and the question with the findings available everywhere is, what is going wrong?
Okay.
So the civil society, just a quick one.
Okay.
The civil society has been able to play this role. What is the media doing? This should have actually, in my view, been the role of the media in articulating these issues, and from both sides, the same energy they have put on the exposure of the benefit and profit of the oil and gas sector for this country and its partners is the same effort I want to see in the exposure of the likely negative impacts of this project. Because I will tell you, on a balanced scale, let me just say this, the negative impacts, as already discussed, really outweigh the positive impacts. And where do we conclude that? I asked you, how much money have you already invested before you see the oil? If you bring the figure, you denote it, and you say, oh, already 10 million. Let me say 1 trillion. It's actually already sunk into the oil industry. 1 trillion only in this financial year, the financial year ending. And then you ask yourself, so what is the likely benefit for our people, but also for the government at the end of the project? When you do an analysis of all these things, surely it is my basis to say that there is something wrong in the media, and I feel that there is a conspiracy around government and the media. And we are going to start a campaign. I'm going to tell you this on this Civic Space TV. Absolutely, I know NBS, NTV, major broadcast houses cannot allow such a conversation. We are going to start a major campaign against the media's conspiracy with government when they see the world burning, when they see our country burning. I hope our people will be able to understand it.
Fair enough, fair enough. Scovia, at the peak of the contest between capitalism and communism, the capitalists advanced the argument that democracy is actually about liberalizing the economy. Open the economy, let people go and, let the forces of demand and supply take charge. And the media has private players. They are not all entirely government, right? Some are private players whose interests are purely capitalistic. They're there to make money. So if there is a deal coming in from government and they're saying, just conceal this information, broadcast this, isn't that only an effect or an outcome of the ever-growing capitalistic economy? That these private players, at times focus on the profit and not the common good.
Right. So the media does play a whole lot of roles, and one of those roles is actually agenda setting. Because as he mentioned, right, there's someone out there who is deciding, what stories get published, what kind of events should be focused on, and there's certain events that are called quote unquote focusing events where when something happens, everyone's attention is drawn to that. But the point I want to make is that most of our media companies here tend to respond to crisis, not necessarily, and once there's a crisis, then right, everyone goes there and then they report on that. But there is no deliberate effort to actually sit down and I know there's efforts to actually do more investigative pieces, but for a long time that has been lacking because we as the Ugandan media, tends to respond to, these focusing events. But what we need is someone to actually take the time, as you said, most of the focus on, the gas and oil exploration and exploitation in Uganda has been on the profits and how that is going to improve Uganda's status from low income to middle income. But we haven't had much talk on the, on the human impact and the environmental impact. And one of the reasons is because, our media has actually failed in its agenda setting role, of actually deciding, there might be a crisis, we are waiting to respond when, let's say, there is an oil spill, and then, people, or, we've seen stories of, let's say, Shell's failure in the Niger Delta region, where, pretty much the whole river is
spilled.
It's spilled,
Yeah,
right?
it's spilled.
And there's fish dying, fishermen are losing their livelihoods, people cannot have access to that water. So we are waiting for such an event to happen before we can start looking at the environmental and human impact of...
Should we anticipate doom like that?
No. Yes, we should, but at the same time, we shouldn't wait for that to happen to be able to talk about those types of things.
We should preempt the conversation.
We should preempt that conversation. The media should conduct those investigative pieces where they assess the impact, both environmental and human, of such projects on the different regions where they're going to be carried out.
All right, thank you. Himara, it looks like we have focused our argument on traditional media, mainstream media, the TVs and the newspapers, but there is digital media. What stops us from using platforms like Twitter, Facebook?
Facebook is not there in Uganda.
Twitter,
using Facebook is a case in Uganda
Twitter,
because government removed it.
WhatsApp, and other digital platforms, because clearly the world has ever since transitioned from traditional media. So aren't we only being crybabies to say, okay, please NTV broadcast this, or NBS do this for us, or New Vision publish this? Yet we
Or
have
even Civic Space TV
yes,
for us.
yet we have our phones right here, and we can take advantage of the digital platforms. So isn't it just, aren't we shielding ourselves from our own weaknesses and our lack of creativity?
Let me start with this. Like I say, I'll not stop telling you guys. I am a human rights justice or gender justice, but in this case, I'm now standing for the public. In Uganda, I think we are 48 million.
You can't
or
know.
something like we are millions, but you'd find that it's at most it's 5 million people that have access to digital media. Colleagues of mine have joined these social medias and probably had their families. Just your family and your close family following you alone makes 1,000 followers. You understand? For me, I need their 1,000 followers to make my 1,000 followers. Why? Because in my family, there are only 3 people who have smartphones. Now, if we're going to talk about things like this information we want to put out, we only have a limited audience. And if we have a limited audience, it comes back to the mainstream media to actually address these things. I believe we have so many political talk shows on mainstream media, and we all know that politics of our country is 6 feet under the grave, and it's useless to us, I would say. Why wouldn't every newsroom or news house probably have a show and say, okay, we are going to have where we have NRM and other parties come and discuss their politics? Why don't we have the pro-oil EACOP and the anti-EACOP? You get? Where would be like cons and pros, and then we discuss, and then we also bring things like the Niger Delta, the Angola thing, the repercussions and oil spills we have had, so that while we are telling people we are getting this money, we also tell them while we are getting this money, be ready for this coming. In the 19th century, I don't remember which particular part, in Nigeria, they found fuel, they found oil, like we are doing right now.
1991.
Thank you very much. 1991, they found oil in Nigeria. They drilled the oil, got their benefits. Years later, decades later, you can't even breathe fresh air in places like Port Harcourt. You get Port Harcourt, River State. You do not have the luxury of breathing in clean air, like, oh my goodness, that's fresh air. You do not have the luxury of coming to your house when you cleaned it in the morning to enjoy it in the evening, because you're going to find black soot everywhere. When I was starting my activism journey, one of my first campaigns was Stop the Soot campaign in Nigeria. You understand? And these guys have had this problem since 2012. You were saying the government is putting all these repercussions, all these things to deal with the aftermath of the fossil fuel production. I believe so that Nigeria in 1991 had people like that and promises like that made. But when Shell and BP finished their harvest of the oil, they left havoc to the population of Nigeria. Right now, you cannot have a baby breathing clean air. The other day, I saw a 1-month-old baby have soot in their nose. And this gentleman, at the same time, had his 3-year-old daughter sick of respiratory issues. You understand? And this is the fate our country faces towards if we keep going in that line. But also, that's why I'm telling you, let's have probably NTV, NBS, all these medias, just have 30 minutes at most on your TVs.
Okay.
And
that's a good recommendation.
30 minutes
I
at
think,
least on your TVs, where you discuss the cons and pros of fuel. Let's not discuss money and jobs alone, because we have had the jobs. Let's not lie to ourselves. Actually, fishermen are actually not unemployed. Farmers are unemployed right now because they're putting up a drilling place.
Yeah.
You understand?
Just correct me if I'm wrong, but I think NBS is currently running a documentary that they've been running for the past couple.
Sponsored content.
I don't want to discuss the content, but they've been running something
It's the most important
around
thing.
oil.
It's the most
Yes,
important
the oil
thing.
report, right?
It's
it
the most
every-
important thing.
Is
This
it
the thing.
every?
Let's go back.
Let's
go back.
Every Wednesday.
Let's go
So
back.
maybe our viewers could pick interest in.
Let's go
Actually,
back to ground.
that
What I'm
report,
saying, uncensored shows, where you have Himara or someone who knows something that's happening on the ground and stands for the people.
Actually,
And where you have your fanatics
Mm.
and they stand for what they stand for or for profit. For me, I'm a major believer in people before profit. People have to be over profit. You get, before you make $1 million, make sure you're not destroying 1,000 lives for you to make that $1 million.
Okay.
just a point of information
Okay.
for her
Okay.
and actually for you as well. You see, my anger, which you can choose to call fanatism, either way, whether pro or against, that can actually be underlined as fanatism. But you see, Mr. Kidega, for you to tell us to move away from looking at the quality of the content on air, and again, as a producer, as a director, at that level, I honestly will tell you that it is the most unpatriotic thing I've seen in Ugandan television. You remember when we used to cheer UBC? Huh? I love UBC these days, I can tell you. The most patriotic thing is that they are building content for development. In times where there are no politics, I can tell you, you're missing out a lot of stuff on UBC. When you want to watch NBS, for God's sake, this is I have my rights reserved for working for it, so I should be protecting it. That you're now talking about the oil report. We have collected the last at least 30 pieces of investigative journalism on oil alone, and we want to ask the major question: where are the people talking in these reports? If it is not Pau, if it is not Enoch, if it is not Tasso Tonde, you know them? Yeah, I don't want to brand people. But that is how our campaign should be looking up to. That we need to demand deliberately that the media stands up to its core ethos. And what are they? They need to produce balanced, quality work and trustworthy content. Otherwise, if you're talking about Mr. Kidega, journalism actually talks about content. It's nothing else. It's not an advert. It's not a commercial.
So
Okay.
before he,
fair enough.
he actually came into
colleagues,
my
our
thing,
time is actually fast spent. But Comrade Brian, let me get your comment regarding journalism and its role towards either pro or against the EACOP project. But also, it's important for us to note that the views expressed on this show are individual views, are not views of Civic Space TV, nor views of the Youth Roundtable, but individual views. So, yes, Brian.
Journalism in Uganda, like other institutions, is captured, and we shall try to fight for its space.
Captured by?
So I want to tell you one thing.
By the state?
I want to tell you one thing.
It could be business.
No, that's what I'm going.
That's why I asked him, captured by who?
No. We have.
Must be specific.
Actually, the state also now in this case is captured by multinational companies.
that is why we're actually taking our activism beyond just our government, because we know our government is thinking of 15%. We're taking it beyond people who are actually earning 70% and telling them, guys, take away your neocolonialism, come back to the table, and let's discuss serious things that help the
Thank you.
climate.
So I wanted to tell you one thing. When you look at the newspapers in Uganda, Daily Monitor, and mostly the New Vision, they have adverts from Stanbic Bank. Stanbic Bank is what they call Standard Bank internationally. Standard Bank is the only bank that has committed somehow to financing that carbon bomb. When you look at those papers still, you see adverts of Total, covering 3 pages, almost every 2 days of the week. Total is the owner of 62% of that carbon bomb. So they will choose 2 things. They decide to be part of the ones promoting the carbon bomb or EACOP, then choose to have a balanced discussion whether EACOP is bad or good, because the ones who are saying EACOP is going to do something are people. So people can't give you business. So our media companies in this country have decided to go business. That's why for us, these things warrant the Vanguard News of running such talk shows and what, are to make sure that when the others are silent, let's be on record. Let's help our communities. That's our interest.
So has the Vanguard News begun to enlighten the public about this?
That's what we have done. We are putting podcasts in place. We are putting articles in place. We are putting videos in place to make sure that people know, because the other because we can't have a one-sided story, which other story is even worse. Because you might lose, will not get money, you lose the environment, and lose everything, lose lives and everything. For you who is here, it's okay. For a person who was told to only plant annual crops from 2018 to today, and yet from 2018 to today you could be having coffee, and yet coffee now, its cost is at about $2. A kilogram of coffee is about $2 now. But a person who was told on their land to remain there, waiting for EACOP to be compensate them, but since 2018, a person who branded coffee in 2018, since 2022, their coffee is giving them maybe 5-6 kilograms per tree. So they would be getting, if you have an acre, you are counting about 4 million shillings. But that's an employment. But the employment you want to talk about in FID and this talk is the employment of a person putting on a suit, seated in Entebbe, feeding his 2 children and his 1 wife. I'm saying, and they are staying in an apartment here in Tinda. Yet a man who could feed maybe children and grandchildren, and maybe has 4 wives, cannot feed them. We want the story of that man, not the story of the guy putting on the tie. That's Sinok and Totar and Unok. And then you look at these reports by the media. Who is funding them? Because the funders are at the bottom. And therefore, what is the interest of the fund? The interest of the funder is the interest of the media house. And that should be discussed.
Well, I think that is for us to evaluate continuously. Because some of these...
If you have not been serious.
Some of these we can only substantiate when we have clear evidence.
No, when we see the funder of the story published.
But for as long as always we can rely on our hearsays and assumptions, then we might need to do more to substantiate. But colleagues, thank you very much for your time. We have 2 minutes to go. I'll just give you all 30 seconds to just let us know what legacy you will remember about the now late fallen Speaker of Parliament, the Right Honorable Jacob Olanya. In just 30 seconds, what shall you remember most about him? I know yours.
I start from here, finish.
Okay, let me start with you.
A flamboyant giant, life started well as UPC, ended bad as NRM.
Okay, fair enough. Yes,
it's my turn. I kind of that threw me off a little, but of course
that was very tough. I mean, harsh to say, but well.
I don't fancy this.
Okay, Scovia.
What? I'm so sorry.
Scovia is still processing your statement.
Right? Can you cut someone off?
Okay, let me come back to her.
Well, I think Jacob indeed should have been a symbol of nationalism. I'll tell you why. There are 2 aspects, and I believe that he will be resting well. I am a Christian, so I believe that when somebody rests and is of the character of Jacob Olanya, he should be in a happier, better place. For all Ugandans, I think we lost a leader. At some point, I believed that should have led this country. He stood for truth. and faced it. And when he used his truth, you'd feel it. I chose not to agonize. I chose not to mourn Olanya. I've been celebrating his life. I have a Twitter handle. I don't want to put his picture there. I just feel he's in a better place, and I do celebrate him.
Oh, thank you. Himara.
Death is sad. It's the only thing we're not sure of, I think.
Now you're sure you will die?
No, we're not sure when we shall die.
Oh yeah.
It's when, but the what is answered.
Yeah.
So it's devastating when we lose someone. Apart from him being the deputy speaker, then the speaker, I don't know so much about him, but I hope he's so resting in peace.
All right, Scovia, hope you're now recollected.
Yes, I'm good to go. I think Olanya, for me, is the embodiment of the politics of this country. And one of the reasons why I say he's the embodiment of the politics of this country is the fact that, he came, obviously we know that he came from UPC and then moved into NRM, because a lot of us know that, right, if you actually, right, I was watching, before even we move any further, I was watching TV on Sunday, and it was the program, I think, when his body arrived to his home in Muyenga, and Akena was talking about how, the UPC, of course, lacked capacity to develop Olanya politically, and that's how he ended up in NRM. And I think that's, that for me was kind of one of the biggest takeaways of Olanya as a politician, right? We do talk a lot about opposition parties in Uganda. And this goes back to my institution thing, right? Like, our opposition, in many cases, does lack capacity to develop people, right? So that they can reach some of the levels of the status that Olanya had reached. And one of the reasons is, of course, the NRM government undermining on political parties. And so the life and legacy of Olanya is really, 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 right, kind of entangled in this, I guess, like, fight of institutional development and capacity in Uganda, whether it be it political parties, opposition parties, or even, right, the parliament itself, if you look at how he rose and became the Speaker of Parliament. That's where I'm going to leave it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, panelists. You've all been amazing. Comrade Arans, Comrade Scovia, Comrade Brian, as usual. Comrade Himara, thank you very much for the time that you've made to be with us this afternoon. To our technical team, Comrade Rashid and the team, thank you very much for ensuring that our viewers get this show right on time. The Youth Roundtable continues to commemorate and, condone with the people of Uganda upon the untimely demise of the now late Right Honorable Speaker of Parliament. And we continue to pray that his soul rests in peace. Until next week, bye-bye. See you.